like, bro, yeah, she got a kid. Look at his back. Oh my god.
Hey, what's up, y'all?
Oh,
Back.
Oh, you already did it.
Yeah, he did. It's heard.
Also, what the heck?
Yeah, this is 3 Creepy Places Horror Stories Animated. Which channel is this? IMR?
Yeah, IMR Scary Stories.
Yeah, this is the first time I think we reacted to him.
Yeah, man, it's the first black dude I heard him one.
It's a black dude narrating this?
There's a whole bunch of different dudes, but I know there's a black dude. I was like, wow.
Oh,
I usually hear like the weird white dudes.
The weird white dude. With the nasally voices.
I went to this
I
place.
don't know. Mr. Nightmare, he was on top for a long time. You know, but he's stuck with the still photos and stuff. And if he would have started working with that guy, Mr. Llama, and had like that.
Mr. Llama? Llama artist?
Yeah. I was thinking Mr. Beast. Mr. Llama, Mr. Beast. There's too much going on in my head. I'm sorry, bro.
That's a hard name.
It's hard to think after the CERN collision. You know what I'm saying?
CERN?
Yeah.
Are you I don't know say that right.
No. Hit that like button, subscribe and share, man. This is Brother 10K. Really appreciate your support. Let us know if you want to see more videos like this down in the comment. Be sure to go check out our other channels, 412 Show and LBB Gaming. I know we just posted a video up on there, so I'll right in.
There was an old abandoned building near my house. Typical, I know. Anyways, there were hundreds of rumors and stories about this building. Some normal, some insanely out of this world. Some used to say an insane maniac lived in there and tortured anyone who entered. I've even heard that it's a portal to another dimension where nightmares come to life.
Skinwalker Ranch.
The only consistent bit of knowledge was that whoever went in never came back. My best friend Samuel and I were huge enthusiasts when it came to anything supernatural or even remotely strange.
Look at that guy.
So we decided to check it out. Since the latest disappearances, cops have been patrolling the area during the day, trying to prevent anyone from getting in, so we had to wait till night. At about 10:30, he came over to start preparing the gear. We made sure to pack some food, warm clothes, and my handgun, in case there was a homicidal maniac living there. We left the house around 11:30 to 12ish, and arrived at the building a couple of minutes later. The second we step out of the car, I noticed an unusual eerie fog surrounding the building. Seeing that it was wintertime, the fog wasn't new to the area, so I didn't think much of it at the time, other than it was extremely thick. We grabbed our gear and headed inside. The door was locked, so we had to break a window to get inside. We threw our stuff in, then climbed into the building. The worst mistake of my life. If I could go back in time, I would have never stepped foot in that hellhole.
It's crazy.
The first thing I noticed inside was how abnormally dark it was. Though we had LED flashlights, they didn't do much help seeing in front of us. We had about 3 feet range of vision, but we decided to explore anyways. Samuel was holding the camera and switched to night vision, but even that didn't do much good. I was holding the flashlight and had my hand close to my gun in case some deranged psychopath attacked from the darkness. As we reached the center of the building, I noticed a smell. Not a nice smell. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It had a metallic tinge to it, and slightly burnt my nose with each inhale. What's that smell? I don't know. It's hard to guess. We followed a long stretch of hallway that led to an open area. The big wall of that room was a huge hole that created a direct entrance into the house from the woods. Vines and saplings were growing all over the floor, ceilings, and walls as well. For a moment, I felt like we had stepped into a wildlife sanatorium. As I flashed my LED light on the hole in the wall, my eyes started getting blurry and my hands started shaking. The flashlight started flickering. Samuel tripped over something and the camera flew out of his hand. It slid a couple of feet, then fell somewhere in the room, shattering into pieces. We knew it was beyond broken, so we didn't even bother trying to get it. We turned the flashlight to the ground to try and figure out what Samuel had tripped over. As the light showed the ground, my heart stopped in fear. A dead deer was lying on the floor. It was torn apart. The body had been chewed on, clawed at, and ripped up. Blood was all over the floor. I immediately recognized the smell. So, it was blood all this time, but the smell was too pungent to have been from one deer. Taking a closer look at the floor, I noticed the blood smeared all over the floor. Not only that, there were prints in the blood, almost like hands, but the fingers were too long. By long, I mean almost a foot in length, and they were pointed at the tip, almost like talons. The prints were everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, and even a few on the ceiling. Oh my God, is this some kind of animal? I strongly believe we shouldn't be here, man.
That's in
Yeah?
Once you see that, you gotta leave.
Don't you want to know?
Don't you want to
Saying
know?
this, Samuel started to follow those freaky handprints. The prints all seemed to lead to one room. The door to the room was barely hinged, and the knob was completely torn off. My heart was racing.
Yeah, Brad.
What the hell is in there? No animal could have done this. No living creature had prints like this. Shh, keep quiet. Samuel was confused. And before I could stop him, Samuel pushed the door open.
I have no
What we saw still haunts me to this day. Piles and piles of bodies, some still intact, others dismembered beyond recognition.
Nasty.
Some animal parts were unmistakably human. The blood on the floor was about an inch high. There were the same prints on the wall and the ceiling. Suddenly, we heard footsteps inside the room, and I realized we weren't the only ones here. Did you hear that? Someone behind us?
Did you hear that?
I think
when I saw an inch
it's
of blood,
above
I
us.
don't know.
My heart sunk right at that point. Samuel was right. With shaking hands, we both flashed our lights to the ceiling and froze in terror. A man was crawling on the ceiling, except he looked too disfigured to be called a man.
What is that?
His head was bigger than his body, and he had long, pointy
Like the real
fingers
thing off of
that
Powerpuff
pointed
Girls.
into sharp claws.
Yeah, that's nasty.
The creature had no skin, and we could see its veins and muscles popping out like a nightmare. The scariest part was his eyes. There was no pupil in them, just red, plain eyeballs. The creature let out a demonic scream, opening its huge mouth, and we ran for our lives, screaming like hell. We could hear the running footsteps
Yeah,
of the
he even
creature
used the gun
behind
in
us.
your body.
Whatever it was,
I could at least
it
pop
was
that
hungry
few
for
times.
our blood. Run, Chris, run! I was about to jump out of that broken window when I heard Samuel scream. I turned around and saw that devil had grasped me by the neck. It looked at me and smiled, showing its huge teeth. Samuel dangled into the air as the creature held him above the ground. And before I could do anything, it snapped my friend's neck like a twig. Saliva dropped as it started to devour him. Because I knew he would come for me once he is done with Samuel. I ran home and stormed into my parents' bedroom, covered in sweat and tears. I told them everything that happened. They called 911. Cops came and called for backup once they discovered the bodies and the bloody scene inside the house. Samuel was never found, and out of agony, locals burned the house to the ground. The cops rolled Samuel's case under the missing persons category, and no one believed me when I told them about this creature. A few years after this incident, I found out shocking information about that place. It is said that many years ago, during the time of the Russian sleep experiment, something similar was conducted in that house.
Russian stuff.
It happened to be a prison for refugee criminals. I don't know if what I saw was real or not, but I am definite some twisted science experiment created this creature that still lurks in those woods behind our house.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. If so, please leave a like. And also, a small percentage of people that watch my videos are actually subscribed. If you want to support this channel and make this channel reach the 1 million mark, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can change your mind with it.
Do you believe that being curious is good or bad? After that day, I know where the saying curiosity killed the cat comes from. I was in high school when this happened. One day, I discovered that not far from my house, there was an abandoned building. Recently, it had become popular among the students to go to abandoned places and explore them. Besides, I thought that later I would have an interesting story to tell that would make me look like a cool person. Excited, I told my friends,
How fast is your mountain
Ethan,
bike?
Christopher, and Matthew, and tried to convince them to go with me.
Ethan,
At first,
Christopher.
Ethan didn't want to come with us, but finally he agreed. Perhaps he didn't want to miss out on that experience. Anyway, we agreed to go the next day after classes ended.
Go to abandoned building.
Walking to the
Like
place
that?
was a bit tiring, as the building was quite deep in the forest. But we managed to get there after a half an hour. The place left us speechless. It was a pretty big building. The walls were dirty, covered in graffiti and plants. Most of the windows were broken, though that didn't help us see what was inside. After a few seconds, we approached the stairs. The front door was open and somewhat broken, so we could get in through there. We had to make our way up the stairs, as there was rubble along with the dirt and dust. So, the four of us stood still once we were at the door of the building. Go first, Steve. It was your idea. You're not scared, are you? Of course I was. At least a little. Now that we were there, I felt less excited, but I refused to admit it, so I went inside. Everything looked as expected. There wasn't much furniture, and what was still there was useless, broken, and full of mold. There was also graffiti
couch.
drawn on
I
the
guess it was
walls
useful,
and
man.
floors,
Nice
almost
couch.
all of which
He's
were
got a
seen
font, right?
words
For our dorm
drawn.
rooms.
At another time, I would have found
Is
it
it no
funny,
sleep, right?
but not right now. Suddenly, there was a loud noise behind us. The door had been closed with great force, which startled us. Ethan, Matthew, and I looked at our friend, the last to enter, with annoyance. What? It was just a little joke. Once we inspected the entrance, we went to the other rooms. In all of them, there seemed to be exactly the same thing as the previous ones, which quickly bored me. For some reason, I expected there to be something more interesting in this place. It was actually quite simple, but perhaps I had judged the building too quickly. My heart started beating fast when I saw Ethan walk into the room at the end of the hall and stand still. The expression of fear and confusion on his face was unsettling. Quickly, the rest of us approached. "Go away" was written on one of the walls in red. The paint looked very shiny, as if it were fresh. Suddenly, Christopher started laughing. You see your faces? You guys are seriously scared? Our friend walked over to the letters and touched them. Then he showed us his hand,
Kind of black eye
which
is
was dry. Some asshole painted it to scare people. See? You guys are a joke. It was pretty obvious, actually. But being in a place like
Guys were a
this,
joke.
with such a
Like a
mysterious
man.
atmosphere and abandoned appearance, made you paranoid. Still, we soon started to feel comfortable and began to split up to explore. I was the first one who decided to go up to the second floor. From the moment I put one of my feet on that floor, an
Scooby-Doo.
awful smell reached my nose.
black
It was like something was rotting, which gave me goosebumps. What more could there be than a body? More out of morbidity and curiosity than anything else.
I would've did.
I followed the stench, which seemed to come from the second room. I slowly poked my head into the room. Seconds later, I felt vomit in my throat. Wanted to come out. There was a dead animal on the spot. Perhaps it was a cat, or perhaps a small dog. The truth was that it was in a state of decomposition, in which it was very difficult to distinguish what it was. It wasn't human, but it was very horrible to see.
I had to find somebody.
The worst
with
thing,
faces.
in fact,
Yeah.
was that it had no eyes, just two black holes
so
in what had once been its face.
Ugh.
I tried very hard not to vomit. Having my
I'm
mouth
gonna
stink
do
with
stuff.
acid
Like,
wouldn't be nice on
Things
the
I'm
way
gonna do to you,
home.
man.
Suddenly, I heard a sound behind me, coming from the first room. Chris, stop it. I was already tired of Christopher's jokes. I couldn't believe he kept trying to scare us like that.
Hey, Chris.
When I heard the sound again, I was finally furious. Chris, enough already. Stop it. I quickly approached the first room in the hall. The fury I felt was replaced by fear as soon as I saw what was inside. I told you to go away.
Oh, nah,
Could
yeah.
be seen on the wall this
That's
time.
a whole different coat of
I
paint.
thought
Yeah,
it was
dude.
another joke, of course, but then I couldn't see the paint dripping off the letters. This time, it was fresh. I stood there a few seconds, breathless, frozen. until I was able to react. Guys! I ran down the stairs while screaming. Soon the others, alerted, arrived. We gotta... Just when I was going to tell them to get out of there, we started to hear some voices outside the building. One of them shouted that we shouldn't be there. The other then yelled for us to go away. Perhaps it was the police. We all looked scared at each other, except Matthew, who made a sign with his hand for us to follow him. As quietly as possible, we walked to a room at the back of the building. We managed to close the door, which thankfully wasn't broken. On the room. Apparently, this one had another door that seemed like an exit. Since it was closed,
a whole double door.
Matthew's plan was for me to open it, since I had a certain skill at doing that. Not because I used it, but because it entertained me. I took out a small piece of metal that I had brought just in case and started.
Pass out.
Quick, quick! I'm on it. It was taking me longer than usual because, apart from being nervous and under pressure, I had the strange feeling that something behind the door was watching me. Almost.
Man,
the door finally gave way. I started to open it when I was able to notice that the air inside was dense. It wasn't a way out. Go away! A scream went out from the room when we were able to see what was inside. Terrified, I walked backwards, but tripped and fell to the ground.
You shouldn't be here. Escape.
In that small room, which did not even have windows, there were two corpses that at this point were nothing more than bones. Still, it was obvious that these were people. Terrified, the four of us ran out of that room. We didn't care if the police were outside. We just did it. But as we ran to the entrance, it began to tremble. The walls started shaking. The rubble began to fall. One of them hit my arm, but I kept going, despite everything.
Bleeding?
Luckily, we got away with just a few bumps and scratches. To our surprise, no one else was around. In the end, we decided to inform the police, despite everything. Inspecting the scene and the bones, they discovered that they belonged to a young woman who had disappeared a long time ago and a man who had escaped from prison. Since there were only bones left, they couldn't figure out exactly what had happened, but there were theories based on some evidence. There was a chain on the wall, and the door was full of scratches. There were also traces of some very old blood on the floor. The conclusion was that the man had kidnapped her, perhaps to torture or rape her. Somehow, the woman would have managed to hurt him, but during the fight, she was also seriously injured. In her state, she couldn't open the door and died. Meanwhile, all I could think about was what the voices said that day. Go away, and you shouldn't be here.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's too wild. Would you ever?
I mean, I've done it before when I was a kid. There's this place up in McKeesboro, it's abandoned in high school. It was like on the top of this hill at the park, and he'd be at the park, he'd be up looking up at the school, looked creepy as hell. But as walking up to it, it seemed like it was a nice school at one point, maybe. But I mean, it was abandoned. There were some parts in it where it was like, you can tell there was like maybe a basement or something, where it was just too dark. I'm just like, I'm not going there's no way. Like some of the rooms, like there was no light. Like you was literally looking in, like there's
well, something grab you, it's over. It's over.
You just fucking turn into one room, you see a face right there.
It's over.
Yeah, but I don't know. A lot of people were using that place as like a spot for music videos and stuff. So
that's wild stuff.
I think the cops actually like bolted up the doors and stuff, so you can't even get in anymore. So
there's one in Elliott. There's like this big White House, man. I remember I went up there once. Never went back there.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it anymore. I'm not looking to find that negative energy and bring it back home with me. I don't need that. I'm cool. But yeah, if I want to see more of these reactions, let us know in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share. It's for the 10K subscribers. Really appreciate all the support. I'll see you next time.
Peace.
Da, da, da.